I'm Miley David. I'm the chair of this committee. And right now, I believe I'm going to go to our outer sites for testimony.
Aloha kakahiaka, Madam Chair and members of the Finance Committee. I am talking on Communication 608. And as a grant writer and community activist, I have been submitting CRF proposals for more than 10 years. Until this year, none were ever denied. And that was because they always met the criteria. I know what the criteria are, and I make sure that when I submit a proposal, it's very clear that what I'm asking for meets those criteria. This year, everything changed. One grant was vetoed by Corp Counsel because he couldn't see the public purpose, and that was a question of his own interpretation. One grant was held up for more than 3 months in Corp Counsel, and we had to borrow the money for this educational event. The award came a month after the event had taken place. Another grant for bus shelters was tied up for 5 months in Corp Counsel, and as a result, the shelters could not be built before the November rains, although we had specifically, mentioned that we wanted very much to try to beat the weather so the children wouldn't be standing in the downpours. And then one grant, the most recent one that 6 of you have signed on to for the Ratlong Worm research, has been subject to a lot of differences in interpretation before approval finally came. I always thought that it was the council that decided if the proposal met the criteria, and that Corp Counsel's kuleana was to ensure that the contract itself was legal as to form and content. Mr. Kamehameha seems to think otherwise. Who makes the final call? If the rules are unclear or not how the council wants them to be, then it is time to do some tweaking so that the roles of county council and Corp Counsel are clarified, and the criteria for the proposals clarified as well. I think this will benefit everybody involved, the agencies, council, and the people who are from the community who are submitting the grant proposals.
Communication 608, request discussion with Corporation Counsel Joseph Kamehameha regarding public purpose and process for the use of contingency relief funds from Council Member Jen Ruggles, dated November 15, 2017.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. And because Ms. Ruggles is not here today, she has requested that this matter be postponed to the call of the chair. So please, if any council member would so.
Yeah,
so
Chair, motion to postpone to the call of the chair.
Now, I'm just wondering if we can start the discussion today and then table it until she gets back. Because, based on what Renee Siracusa said, I didn't realize, the extent of the problem. But, a lot of things being held up, I think, we should at least get some information.
Council members, your preference, if that's the case, then I think, so in deference to her, we'll withdraw the motion, we'll have our little discussion.
I guess if we could have Mr. Kamehameha come forward. I know the Office of Corporation Counsel had provided some training for individual council members and staff, I believe almost a month ago. And I guess maybe we can just start there, Mr. Kamehameha, and just provide that framework. And then I know Mr. Chung seems to have questions, and based on our testifier, where the hiccups are.
Joseph Kamehameha, Corp Counsel. Thank you. Sure. Wait, let me just look at my notes. I've done some training. I had to because there were certain things that I saw that there was some issues, not only with administration, how they would look at the requests, but also some of the council members. So what I did, I set up 2 training. One was on October 24th, 2017. It was attended by about 23 people. Council had county council people and county clerk. There was several administrative departments that were there. We had DEM, prosecutors, housing, R&D, fire, P&R, finance, and planning. Subsequent to that, I also did training in Kona because I didn't feel like people from Kona should be driving over, so I drove over to also provide training for the council members there. And the training was conducted on November 8, 2017. They were giving a PowerPoint presentation. There was some handouts that were provided during that time. So so I felt that was a good class. I saw what the evaluations were like. So I can start from there. But it was important to give training, only because a lot of issues were coming up. And, we want to make sure that, we could comply with the provisions of the code.
Thank you, Mr. Kamehameha. Ms. Lee Lloyd.
Mr. Kamehameha, you keep referring to issues. What issues?
Some of them, I'm not sure if I want to address it publicly, but essentially what I would state this generally, that there's several sections that we look at. Section 2-137, 138, and 139. That's the expression of the public purpose that had been set aside in terms of the contingency relief funds. So there are requirements that are set out in those things that we look at. And so the basic threshold question that we should look at, and because it was a new administration, there were certain things that they I didn't feel had analyzed it correctly. And also there were changes that we had made on the contract side to ensure that these contingency relief funds, are appropriately determined. So I also had council members contact me about various issues, and not only me, but some of the other staff members had provided answers to many different questions.
Okay, so with regard to the issues, some of these contingency fund requests are time sensitive, and we try to advance them as quickly as possible. You referred to changes in the contractual procedures. Could you please enlighten us further? Because in the past, we did not have such overriding scrutiny from Corporation Counsel per se. The process for contingency funds. We meet with constituents who are in need of funding for specific projects. We advance that to a department within the county to issue that contract. The money needs to be passed over either to an agency within the county or to a nonprofit, and that's a 501c3 type of nonprofit. There's plenty of nonprofits out there. So that's our basic procedure, and that's what we've been following till this administration inserted some extra steps to that procedure, which meant everything had to go through Corporation Counsel and before the procurement officer. Now, I understand the procurement officer were entering into contract, and I would imagine that Corporation Counsel would review final contract, because that's standard procedure. But there seems to be an insertion of activity before we even get to the contract stage, because there's some activities that have still not been contracted that were approved by the council last year, in the last fiscal year.
Yeah, right now I have no knowledge as to what wasn't approved. The only knowledge that I have is that there are a lot of things that I have approved. So let me just add a couple of things here. On the contract side, for example, there needed to be some in insurance that certain kind of reporting gets done. It's the same thing with the grants in aid. That these nonprofit people know what the code requirements are for reporting. So many of these contracts or agreements didn't have that. So we added those so that the nonprofit knows as to what their duties are with respect to these contingency relief funds. So we had worked with departments to ensure that those provisions get put into the contracts. So that was one of the changes that was done. There is no requirement that the county council themselves would always seek our approval, because there are certain things that to me is obviously satisfy the code. What I've experienced, the county council members asking me about certain areas, and then to ensure that their consistency, we would give them, our analysis so that it's consistent. For example, when I look at the county code section 2-137, it's clear that one of the threshold issues is that, is this nonprofit providing a service or activity? To me, a service and an activity doesn't mean a request for capital improvement projects, because that a capital improvement project is not a service, or it's not what activities. So sometimes we get issues like that, and so what I have noticed by the research that I did with prior corp councils on this matter, it's very few requests that actually gets denied on our side, because it's really less than 1% that we're talking about. And so sometimes also, just to add on to this, is that the reason provided by the department is not accurate. For example, when a public purpose, for example, if a department tells me that a public purpose is established because it's a nonprofit, that's wrong already. So I have to dig deep and say, well, what do you mean by that? Just because a organization, is a nonprofit, doesn't make it public purpose. So it's things like that we deal with.
I understand the public purpose doctrine, and I also believe that in many regards, the individual council person who is working with the community on said project has a better understanding of what that public purpose is than perhaps Corp Council. While it may not be conveyed through the application process properly, and that may have something to do with how the departments develop the contract, I understand that it may be lacking at that level. But most of the projects that I'm aware that are still not in contract from last year have serious public purpose and benefit. But this thing about capital improvement, I think we're redefining what capital improvement is in some regards, because it's not a capital improvement project undertaken by the county. It's a capital, what you think may be a capital improvement project by the community, may be something as simple as building bus stops. They don't perceive that as capital improvement. And in the past, these types of projects have been funded through contingency funds in the past, and now they're being called out. And this is where I'm seeing the problem. Now, I'm not going to advance this any further, because this is with regard to not my ask, not my request. But we will come back to discuss this when Ms. Ruggles is present, because I know this has occurred for her, and it's still being hung up, and the community is still asking questions as to why they can't receive the money that the county council allocated to them. The only instance that I've had some problems was when we were coming forward for something that is related not just to public health. It's related to agriculture, it's related to tourism, it's related to veterinarian medicine, it's related to many things that is a focus of our research and development. Now, that's where I ran into some problems with misinterpretation of the nature of the project and the public purpose and public benefit thereof. And unfortunately, or fortunately, we were able to move this past, but it was time sensitive, and I was not getting a timely response from Corporation Counsel in order to move this forward. So I'm just saying, with certain projects, it is going to be time sensitive because it may come up to an event, or it may come up to an opportunity that is there and going to disappear. So we sometimes have to move rather quickly, and I would ask, if there is questions, that there be a more a faster way to interact with the particular council people.
No, and then I do appreciate it because you had called me on something recently that that we were able to move quickly on, and part of it is because I was there, to make sure that there was a way to do this. So.
I'm not sure that 21 iterations of the application moves quickly. That's what it took us to get that resolved. So I'm sorry, but that's.
Well,
yeah.
I disagree that it was 21, but yeah, but we want to make sure that we followed what's in the code. So, I mean, I do appreciate that your council members have talked to me in the past about certain things, which is kind of important. As far as what you mentioned about the shelter, we had improved it, approved it because then I researched it a little bit more. But like I said, it's better to get the correct information. I didn't have the correct information at the time, and so I actually brought the department in and asked them, next time that you guys, work with the council members, get good information. I cannot work without good information. And so that was part of the impetus of getting training to emphasize, provide us with good information.
Of course, I think we all, appreciate Joe's concern for the county and, making sure that we do things right. What concerns me about this, and I'm going to break this into its simplest component as far as I can tell. It looks like the Corp Counsel's office, maybe more specifically the Corp Counsel, is the gatekeeper for our use of contingency relief funds by making the determination as to what constitutes a public purpose. Now, public purpose is a very subjective term. I think we make the decision as to what constitutes a public purpose. And perhaps we should put more information in those resolutions, making an affirmative statement that it is in the public interest that, these funds be used for this particular purpose. Or we could redo our county code and say that, require the county council to make those affirmative findings, and they will be final, not subject to approval by any other department. You guys do your ministerial duties, move it along, and move it along quickly. Because people cannot be waiting around for things, not knowing whether they're going to come out of your office or not. And if you're following the law, I got no problem. If we need to tweak it, that's what we should do, and we should move on that forthwith. If we do something like that, will that take you out of the loop? Will you feel comfortable with that?
Well, there's a certain, kind of things that we cannot do because the code itself, has statement as to what's not public purpose. For example, there's the section in the code that says you cannot use it to discriminate.
Yeah, of course.
Things like that, or you can't use it for entertainment purposes. For example, the nonprofit cannot use it for their own parties. I mean,
Right.
those are obvious kind of things, and plus that there's a provision in there already that says, you can't use it for prerequisites.
For what?
Prerequisites they
Yeah,
call
okay.
it. So that's defined. So the county prior council had already said, well, we're not going to have public purpose in these areas. But what's clear so far with what the council have done, they have established what public purpose is, you know, and then it had stated in what areas, you know, public health, you know, I mean, there's a whole list of items that they had listed, but the threshold issue is it has to relate to services or activities.
Right.
Right.
I think
So-
we all agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah, so that's in there. It's just that there's this area, you know, that I think is hard to overcome. Capital improvement, for example. You know, part of it is my own experience with nonprofits. When we go out to do funds, I've been with 2 nonprofits where you know we have either state or county land, so it's easy for us to get public funds to help build facilities. You know, in those kind of situations. So if we want to do capital improvements, you know, that's hard. I mean, because it's not spelled out in the county code, but that's going to require a lot of requirements just to get there. You know,
Wow.
and I'm not too sure if that's something that the county council wants to get into. You know, to fund
we
for
do,
capital
because we don't
improvement.
have too much money to begin with.
Yeah,
And we started with 100, and then, you know, we tried to play ball with the administration, and we got it down to 75. I will tell you this, Joe. I still believe we should make the call. Okay?
oh no, that's
Yeah.
that's a
You
given.
guys shouldn't get involved in it because too much subjectivity. But, you know, if this is, and I'm not in any way suggesting that it is, it's some attempt by the administration, with whom I gotta say, you know, we don't have the greatest relationship with. If it is some kind of power move, then I'm gonna tell all of you right now what we should do is, during the course of our budget, we sequester a whole bunch of money under emergency relief. We shave so much off of the administration's budget and we keep it with us and have them come to us periodically to have those monies dispersed. If that's the kind of game, but I'm not suggesting that you are an emissary for anybody from the administration, but if it is, and if I get that feeling that it is, then that's what we should do. But if not, short of that, I would say this. We're going to do something to try to keep you, Joe, out of this controversy, and hopefully that will solve everything. Okay, because I don't think you want to be in there. You don't want to be caught in this position where you become the czar for determining what a public purpose is. We all have good sense or senses as to what these things are, and I think I will attest to, you know, each of my council members' integrity. They have been exercising it responsibly. So just, if you need us to make an ordinance, just say so. If not, I would say, just stay out of it. Okay?
Anyway, thank you, Councilmember John. Anyway, no, there's no really power play. It's just that, like I said, I've been dealing with both sides. You know, I think it's going to get better only because now I feel like training was provided, so that there's a clear message. There is a process that has been set up, but I want to make sure that you know, people that work with me understand fully what the guidelines are, because in the end, you know, public purpose has been determined by the county council through enactment of the code already, and my first thing that I look at is to make sure how can we make it happen. That's why it might take 21 iterations of something, but we're trying to find out a way to how to make certain things happen under the code.
Right. And
So I think it's getting better, and it's going to get better.
well, I don't know if it's going to get better. I mean, it's your perspective. But the training, you keep on talking about training, but you're training something that we disagree with. So I don't understand what the purpose of the training. I mean, I guess within the context of how you view it, yeah, it's effective training. But from how we view it, it's not really good.
No,
So-
but and you know, and then I'm willing to see, like, if there's any kind of disagreement with the training that I'm giving, I want to know so that I can see if there's ways to, if there's a need to change the code to make it clearer. That would be helpful for me.
Okay, right, all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Something that you had said earlier made me feel a little uncomfortable because I respect all 501c3s. They're highly regulated entities. They always serve a public purpose. And they're regulated through the IRS, the feds, and also with the state. So when you spoke of that we cannot use it for anything that is, cause any discrimination or for parties, personal parties and all of that, if we're going through the nonprofit, that's their purpose, their whole goal is not for profit. And their whole being is of public service and for a public purpose. So contingency funds that we give out, if it's not just given to a department, if it's just given to Parks and Rec, say I need a basketball goal for Honoka'a Gym, I'll go to Parks and Rec and just go directly and give money over. If it's going to be to a nonprofit, then that I can find the department that it should go through. But going to the nonprofit, again, like I stated earlier, they're all for public purpose. We all own all of the nonprofits. It's all of our money, the people's money. So it's, for me, a nonprofit is working for the good of the public. So that alone should satisfy anything that we're doing. And the main thing that we're going through, that 501c3, that is held accountable through being regulated, highly regulated. So I just want to leave you with that thought. So thank you very much.
Being a nonprofit actually gets you into the door, but there is still a need then to comply with all of the requirements in the code. I mean I've dealt with a lot of nonprofits too, because I've been involved in many of them too. Yes, they're all set up for specific public purposes, but at the same time, the code requires certain kind of things, and that's why I stated earlier too. It's just less than 1%. Are the more difficult ones. Where I've gotten questions from many county council members. I like nonprofits. They serve a great purpose, and that's why people like me have always worked with nonprofits.
But when a nonprofit wants to be involved to do a capital improvement project that benefits, say, a county facility or a bus stop or a county park, wouldn't that be a different situation? Okay. Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to point out, we're talking in somewhat generalities, and that bothers me a little bit because if you're familiar with the IRS code, there's many forms of nonprofits. And in this case, we're only dealing with a 501c3, which is a organization for public purpose. So I just want to point that out because the chair said that by default, you're dealing with public purpose. And also, when you're talking about capital improvement for that organization may be a community organization. So it is representing a very large community. In my district, which is Puna, and Ms. Ruggles represents Upper Puna, we have some of the largest subdivisions in the United States. And they are managed, in some cases, by their community associations. So when you're doing something in connection with one of those community associations, the reach of the project is very broad in terms of the full public that it impacts. And every community association that does have a facility in the Puna area that I'm aware of, at least in my district, those facilities aren't just available to the members of that particular subdivision. They can be leased and rented and used by others. So it has a very broad-reaching public impact. And if we didn't have those community association buildings, we would have nowhere to hold public meetings and have public events. So this is very, very important in my community. I mean, when the Army Civil Affairs guys come and they're asked to evaluate public county buildings that can be used in emergency situations for shelter, I don't have a single such building in my district. Our communities shelter in their community association buildings. So this is it's different, and we have to take a clear perspective, and that's where I'm saying that the council person who is proposing this action has a much better understanding of the public purpose that's involved there than, say, someone here in Hilo who doesn't have that connection with the community. So I think it's very important that that decision rests with the council. Thank you.
What is the difference, CRF and the county's grants in aid program? I think what it means is what's the difference between CRF and the county's grants in aid program? But that's a good topic because one would ask, well, what is the difference? Well, what you said in here, well, I'm guessing that you're the author of this, that the county criteria for qualification is that it for grants in aid, public purpose only. For the CRF, county-related program or service and public purpose. Where do you get that county-related program part?
Oh, that's from the county code because you have to do it via resolution.
Right.
And
It
so
passes through?
Yeah, so that's the pass through.
I don't see anything in there saying that has to be a county-related program, though.
No, but that's why you pass it through because the
No.
well
You have to find a vehicle.
right.
Right. But I don't see anything in here that says it has to be a county-related program. Where you got this county-related program? You're kind of putting one and one together and coming up with four. Because nothing
No,
is specific.
it says in the code itself
This is what the code
that
says.
no, but see the county department is not going to pass it through unless it satisfies one of its goals and objectives. So that's why it's easy for a nonprofit to do certain things for county buildings or scorecard.
No. I disagree with that. I mean, I guess we could clean it up if we try to amend our code. But this is what it says. And I agree, it does pass through.
Right.
And that's how the makers of this ordinance did it many years ago. But I really don't think that they were intending it to be a county-related program. We could just as well make it straight through like we do with the grants and aids, and that would get you guys, off the hook completely. But we still want some connection with the county, right?
Right.
That's why sometimes we send it through liquor or R&D when
Right.
it's cultural, educational, even through liquor. Prosecutors, we do those things to get them involved,
Right.
but not to stop the process. All it says is, this is for grants from district contingency relief funds. Appropriations from the district contingency relief accounts shall be transferred to an accepting county department agency via resolution, identifying nonprofit organization and the specific program project, their specific program project, event, activity, service, equipment, materials, and/or supplies for which the grant shall be used. But nothing specifically says it has to be a county-related program. And that's how we've been doing it all these years. I'm not saying that only because we've been doing it all these years makes it right. If this thing specifically said it had to be related to a county-related program, then case closed. We just change it, of course. But it doesn't say that. You are saying that based on some loose reading of this. It's not right, Joe.
No, but that's always been the position of the corp council that I know of anyway. So, and if it wasn't for the requirement via resolution that requires a accepting department, I think it would make it harder to establish public purpose when you come to these kind of contingency funds, because that's what it is. It's contingency funds. You know, there are things that happen, after the budget cycle, that people need help, and if there's a way to change the ordinance, to make it clearer, then
Okay. I mean,
Yeah.
well, at least we know where you stand, where we stand. I guess what's also troubling here is, and I don't know if it's true or not, and I don't know if, well, I guess that Renee is still over there. The time it's taking your office to make decisions on this thing is wreaking havoc on everyone. Us, the nonprofits. That's not a good way of doing business, Joe. At least say yay or nay, and let's get on with business. But I mean, and I'm not saying that what she related was correct. Maybe it's not 3 months, maybe only 3 days. I don't know, but people got to know where they stand.
Oh, no, I totally agree with that. And some things take a little bit more research than others.
Well,
so.
yeah, but it does, but it cannot take that much research, really. I mean, if it's a subjective thing, just use your common sense and say, well, this doesn't fit. I cannot see how much research something like this is going to take. Months. Cannot. Impossible. But I think it's all moot, because
Right.
we're probably going to move to change some things and
Okay.
tweak our ordinance and make you feel comfortable. And thank you very much again, Joe.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of county-related projects that Mr. Chung was saying, it might not be in the code, but it's in our council rules where it specifically accounts for county-related projects. If you look at Rule 27, Section 3A, it specifically states that it has to be used for a county-related project. So I don't know if it says that, if it doesn't say that in the code, it says it within our council rules, and that's easily that we can change too. So I don't know if Corp Council got it from our council rules, but it does say that and specifically for county-related projects. So I just wanted to bring that up just for future reference, and I don't need to discuss anymore. I definitely want to hear from Ms. Ruggles and why she brought this up in the first place. So thank you.
My colleagues know I have always advocated for good information helps us make good decisions. And the backdrop that I keep hearing from the rest of my colleagues is that we do go get real good information. We work with the community. We do the due diligence. Every single one of us up here, we're smart. We can read the rules and we can make it fit. And what has become extremely frustrating, which emerged during those training classes, Mr. Mello, was the frustration of the timing. We work with the departments and they sign off on a contingency relief application form. We have to draft the resolution, and setting it on an agenda doesn't happen overnight. And for example, we have some critical path deadlines to help some of these communities. We set it on agenda. It's agendized for the public to weigh in, very transparent. And then it goes over to Corporation Council for more questions or more delays and more stalls. And that is what appears to me to be extremely unfair. And if, like Mr. Chung is suggesting, improving the rules or improving the policy, that's what this body is intended to do. But the integrity of all of us serving community, that's why we sit here. I wasn't going to say anything. There's a lot of information out there because there's a long process for these contingency relief funds. And I also am looking at language myself in adding into the resolutions, maybe like a 4-corner checklist so that we can ensure the department and Corporation Council that it's passed its test. But one thing that's not being mentioned today is sometimes these monies go into a department and all of it is not utilized. They come in, request $2,500, we submit receipts, and for whatever reason, costs have gone down, or they weren't all utilized, and only 2,000 of it has been spent. And that extra $500 does not get returned back to us to then further help community. So I think the conversation is ripe, where we're looking at opportunities to improve policy. That's just my thoughts. I know Ms. Ruggles is not here. And I'm going to ask the chair if everybody's done sharing. I want to maybe make a motion to defer.
Thank you, Ms. Leloy. I believe everyone's done. It's been moved by Ms. Leloy to postpone this matter to the call of the chair. It's been seconded by Ms. Poindexter. Any discussion on the postponement? No? And I think, thank you, council members, for the discussion regarding this. And I believe when Ms. Ruggles is able to be here, we will actually expand on some of the concerns that you've been hearing from the council members. So thank you very much. All those in favor, please say aye.